Okay, well, my name is Ivor Luffing, and I'm the art teacher at Skowhegan Area High School, and this is a mural that we painted with the art club with at least 35 students over 2 years. And we came up with the idea of having it be the history of Skowhegan from 1700 over here to 2018 over here. And so it's a lot of the things the kids felt were important in Skowhegan history. The first thing we did was we took a little trip to the History House in Skowhegan, and they told us about a bunch of neat things, and they gave us photos and information about a lot of things that we didn't know about before. So we'll be getting to those as I explain the mural. And so, as I said, 35 kids participated in this, and me, and we worked every Wednesday afternoon, and other times we worked together doing this mural, little by little. And it starts over here in 1700, and you have Chief Bombazine over here, and he was the chief of the Kennebec people, who were different. They're Eastern Abenaki people, and here they are. And he was killed trying to warn people about the Norridgewock Massacre. He saw Harmon and Moulton coming, and he knew that they were coming, and he wanted to warn his wife and kids. So he was quite a bit down from where the village was, which is up now in Madison, and he was warning them, and he got killed down here someplace. Then we have the Abenaki dwellings, and of course the word for moose in Abenaki is moose. That's why we still have that name. And the salmon harvest, people got a lot of salmon around here. That was one of the major things they lived off of around here. And a catamount, which of course is the name of the eastern cougar, which aren't around anymore, or are they? And then we're moving on a little bit in time here, and we have the French and Indian War in 1750, and a little bit before the Revolutionary War, people started to show up around here. This is Joseph Weston and Peter Haywood, and they came from down in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and their parents brought them up here, and then the river froze and they couldn't get back up here. So these guys were just kids. I think they were 12 and 16, and they spent the whole winter here, and they became some of the first settlers. Then along came the Revolutionary War, and of course Benedict Arnold came up here with his bateaus, his expedition, and these green wood bateaus. They had to lug them up over every falls and everything. So they were exhausted by the time they hit Skowhegan. But then they got even more tired. And one of the Westons, I think, was one of the first people killed on the expedition. He went with them, the father of maybe these guys. And another person who came along with him was Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr was a famous character. Later on, he, of course, became famous for shooting Alexander Hamilton in New Jersey. But Aaron Burr came along, and there's a legend that maybe he had an affair with an Indian princess named Jaquetwa. Anyway, we don't know about that, but time moves on, and there's the Woodland Caribou, which has been extirpated. They're only up in Newfoundland now. And then the United States, of course, became a country right around the same time as Benedict Arnold took his expedition. And people started moving in. You see things start to happen. You have pioneer women here. You have the Philbrick potters. These are the Philbrick brothers, and they were both brothers that had pottery around here in the early 1800s. And you have a hunting dog. The kids decided to put a hunting dog, and of course, one of my kids, Hannah Mae McAllister, had to put a goat in there. And then we got, which is great, we got horse racing, wolves, also extirpated from here, and Locke's Tavern, which just burned a couple of years ago, this Locke's Tavern, and it was one of the older buildings in town, and of course they had all sorts of interesting things that they served there at Locke's Tavern, including like pickled squab, all these different, I was telling the kids, eels, all the various foods that they served at Locke's Tavern back in the day, and of course, beer and stuff. And around that same time, the Skowhegan State Fair started up in 1818. Oldest state fair in the I don't know, maybe the country, maybe the state. And you have, we'll just continue this one. And then you also have Dr. Conant, and Dr. Conant had a miracle remedy. He had his anhidrosis remedy, which involved getting in this box, getting heated up, and then they would take you out of the box and they would rub you down with liniment that contained about 1 or 2% opium. So you always felt better from this, and then you needed more. So Dr. Conant, who was never actually a doctor, he was a photographer, but then he got into that, became very big, and he even started the Anhidrosis Sanatorium, which actually turned into a hospital here in town. And then, of course, you have Maine Statehood around here, because of the Missouri Compromise. You got the ice industry. You got Atlantic salmon. As they built more and more dams, the Atlantic salmon kind of went away. And then you're starting to move in. You got agriculture. And, of course, around the 1840s, you had the Underground Railroad. And the Philbrick Potters, who are these guys over here, actually took in a bunch of people who were on the Underground Railroad. And a lot of people in this town, at significant risk, because it was illegal at the time, helped runaway slaves make it to Canada. So that was part of it. Then you have farmers moving in. And over here you have Dr. Mann. And I don't know about you guys know about the Dr. Mann Road, but that's the Dr. Mann. And of course he was not a real doctor either, but he was a muckraking journalist who published the famous Somerset Democratic Republican. That was their paper. And then you got Governor Abner Coburn, who is another big figure around here. And I know the Washburns, Rob Washburn has started Governor Abner Coburn Day. So there's Governor Abner Coburn. He was the governor during the Civil War. And so that's why we have the Civil War right here. And we got a Maine Coon cat here, because the kids like cats, and we put a Maine Coon cat in here. And of course we have the Coburn Mansion, which is right here in town as you go up the hill on the south side. That was the Coburn Mansion. And then you got the courthouse. He and his brother got the courthouse moved, and the county seat moved from Norridgewock to Skowhegan. So that was a point of contention because, as we all know, Norridgewock and Conant both owned Skowhegan at one time, but Skowhegan fought its way to becoming the shire town and the county seat thanks to Abner Coburn. And then you get up, things are moving along here. We're moving along in time here. So now we have the trolley to Lakewood, and they used to have a trolley that went to Lakewood, and they even had like a little recreation area somewhere around where the high school is now. And they also had another trolley that went to Norridgewock, and one from Madison to Lakewood also. So that was big. And the train. The train was the big thing around here. Here's the train that went to Portland. And the kids said that we needed a train, so we put a big train in there. I thought that was great, especially the president of the art club. She really likes the trains, Monica, so we put it in there. And then you have a sort of industry started up around here. So you have a lot of industry, and with industry came the Industrial Workers of the World, also known as the Wobblies. Now we have a friend who helped us out, and Sister Maggie, and she did this. There was a cartoon from back then showing the industrial workers of the world, industrial unionism attacking capitalism, which was shown as a big octopus taking over. And of course there was war, poverty, wage slavery, child labor, and all this stuff. It was coming out and getting all this. So there was a giant strike of the industrial workers of the world that actually went national and even went worldwide. And that was back in that day, back in 1906, I think it was 1907, it was a big thing. Then we have the Old Mill, which at that time was the Old Mill, not just the Old Mill pub. And you have the Weston Dam, which of course was making electricity. And Skowhegan, down here you can see this is the walking bridge here, that's been here since the early 1900s. You got electricity. And Skowhegan is one of the first towns to get electricity. It got it 4 years after Philadelphia, which is kind of a scary thing if you see some of the electrical setups in some of the basements of these houses around here. Fortunately, back then they used knob and tube, so it's very hard for the two wires to get together. But our house had a lot of knob and tube wiring in it. And it's actually not that bad, but it's kind of very antiquated. And so Skowhegan had electricity very early on. Then you have Louise Helen Coburn, who started up the History House. And she was related to some of the first settlers, the Coburns. She started up the History House, which is where we went to get a lot of our information about the early days of Skowhegan. And then, of course, right around the turn of the century, you have something called curling. And this is where all the kids who were from the high school here would curl each other's hair, which was a big thing to do because, you know, the guys and the girls would get together and curl each other's hair. And that was big because then there was a lot of touching and curling the hair and stuff. Then they would get wild and go and terrorize Madison, which is always a, you know. So Margaret Chase Smith was there are some pictures of Margaret Chase Smith at these curling parties around the turn of the century. And of course, the older folks thought that was deviltry. They're getting too wild with their curling parties. So anyway, then you get along, we're moving along. Here's a World War I soldier, and of course they have their gas mask here around their neck. And a lot of boys from Skowhegan went off to fight in the First World War. Right as soon as the First World War got over, along came the Spanish flu. And the Spanish flu killed more people than the First World War. It was way worse. But these guys are wearing masks to keep themselves from getting sick from the Spanish flu. This went all worldwide very, very quickly. And large numbers of people died. And right around that time, of course, the automobile was becoming big. So one of the first automobile dealers was a Ford dealer here in Skowhegan. Holt and Height moved on from selling hay and grain, and they started selling Ford Model Ts, Tin Lizzies. So there's a guy in 1911 driving around in his Model T Ford. And then we got Franco Americans started showing up in big numbers around this time, and they were working in the various factories and places around here. So Franco Americans, and this is a fleur-de-lis, which is a symbol of that, and you have the priest and the woman dressed in the clothing of the day, the Franco Americans. Then, of course, you got, we're moving on here, and we got other cars here. This is Blunt Hardware from Skowhegan. That was done by Hunter Corson, who was one of our students who was here. Loves drawing trucks, so he did this truck. And this is a 1940s Halloween decoration. One of our students really liked the Halloween decorations from around that time. And of course you have the famous coach, Archie Dostie, who was, they actually named the track Archie Dostie Track after him. And he was a basketball coach, track coach, and also a chemistry teacher. And a number of people had him in school, including Doug Corson, the guy who owns this gallery. Told me he had him in school, and he learned all about the Red Sox from Archie Dostie. And then, of course, you have the World War II Gold Star Mother, and if you had a kid die in the war, you would be a Gold Star Mother. So you would get this to hang in your window. And then you got the ice cream industry, which of course is big around here. It went from Hunt's Dairy to Gifford's, and now that's the big thing. And of course, we did the local ice cream place that we love. Anyway, just as an example of that. And then we're moving into the 1950s by now, and of course we have the Bobby Soxer, and she's dressed up as they would have dressed back then with her tight pants and sweater and stuff. And then we got underneath here Height Chevrolet. I think they had gone to Chevrolets by then. Chevys became very popular. And of course, Hunter loves to make cars, so we had him do a car. And then we have who visited, but President Dwight Eisenhower came and visited his friend, Margaret Chase Smith. And there she is with her iconic rose right there. And of course, that was around the time of the Declaration of Conscience, and the time that she was most well known for in when she was a senator. Then up here we got downtown Skowhegan here, and you can see downtown is thriving back at those days. There was a lot of activity down here, and as the place around here went from a lot of farming to growing up, of course, the white-tailed deer became more and more prominent, and so white-tailed deer became bigger and bigger around here because of the overgrown farms. And then they started up Eaton Mountain, which was quite a place back then. We're moving into maybe like 1960s, 1970s. And we have the haunted Strand Cinema. Very haunted. Apparently the most haunted theater in the state. Anyway, that's the Strand Cinema right there. And you can see the little ghosts coming up out of the Strand Cinema. And it's playing Star Wars. Because this is like the when would this be? 1970s, right? And the Indian sculpture showed up. Bernard Langley showed up with the gigantic, the world's largest wooden Indian. So Bernard Langley was asked to do a little sculpture 20 or 30 feet tall, and he said, no, we're going to have a 60-foot Indian. So he brought it in, and they closed the State House, and everybody checked it out. And they brought it in a big flatbed truck and stood it up here. And just 2 or 3 years ago, thanks to Steve Dion and a lot of other people, they renovated it and fixed this beautiful sculpture back up, but there are now a lot of homeless squirrels. But I think they found their way back in there, so we shouldn't worry about them too much. And then, down below here, of course, in 1976, we had the last of the log drives on the Kennebec. And this is Dakota Melvin, one of my students made this. And you can see the log drives were a very big part of the scene around here, but the last one was in 1976. And of course, they built the S.D. Warren Mill around that time. And the S.D. Warren Mill, now known as the Sappy Paper Mill, was a really big project. And it was the newest, I think it's the newest paper machine in the state. And it's still going and thriving, I think, thanks to what they're doing now, which is they're making cardboard for Amazon boxes and other things. So they had the finest coated paper, and they still make that beautiful coated paper. And we have Skowhegan Area High School right here, which was built around that same time. And we got a dog, because we got to have a dog in there. That's done by Caitlin Kotelnikoff. She did a really nice job. And then we have the football state champs. Right around the mid-late 70s, the Skowhegan won the state championship several times in football. So there's a guy kissing the gold ball. Then we got music, and this is about the time that anyway, the Savages were playing their music. And then we got rock and roll coming in right here in the, when we get to around the 80s, we got a lot of rock and roll. And Main Street happened. And wildlife started to come back. So the art club president, Monica Millette, decided to put in a duck there. So it's a really nice, to represent wildlife coming back in. And another thing that started, if you had a kid around this time of the the 90s or so, they always had their Game Boy. And so that's Mario popping up out of the Game Boy. So that's a big part of that. And along about early 2000s, Empire Falls was filmed right in downtown Skowhegan, and it turned it into sort of a Hollywood back lot. It was really fun to check it out about that time. And so we have Ed Harris and Danielle Pennebacher right there hanging out in downtown Skowhegan at the Empire Grill, which continued for quite a while. It was a really fun place to go. And then, of course, we have the electric car that I built with some of my students, thanks to Art Haynes, who's an amazing inventor in Norridgewock. We got the Sunny V, and we have the maple industry. And we used Jay Steves. The Steves family has had helped the maple industry to revive right here in Somerset County. And you can see here he is. Now he, being Jay Steves, that could be John, Jeremy, or Jack Steves. How about that? And this represents a sugar house that is boiling right around here, and the rebirth of that industry. And then of course we have the shoe industry, the patriotic mural, run of river, which is a big part of, that's revived the river here. Pokemon Go. This was, the kids wanted to put this in. I thought it was a great idea. Pokemon Go, because that's a big part of what goes on around here. And then you have this bull. And this bull, this is Hannah had to put this, Anna May had to put this in here. A bull, and what happened is there was a bull that fell in the river. And so of course it has a little halo around the head here from where it fell in there. So I think it's a lot of bull. Anyway, we're moving up here. We got Maine Grains. Maine Grains has moved in around here and makes incredibly delicious foods, and we were just there this morning eating. And basketball and of course field hockey have been big influences around here. The Skowhegan's won the state championship many times in field hockey, so that's a big part of what happens around here. You got Lake George Regional Park. Now Lake George Regional Park has been going now for quite a while, since about 1992 or 3, and they're our local park. Started up by the local communities, Skowhegan and Conant, and you can see it says Skowhegan Conant. And of course, the Skowhegan State Fair continues, and here's the demolition derby with a bunch of cars getting crunched around here. So that's always entertaining. And these here are Langley Sculptures, including this basketball guy here, but he also represents basketball. We have the Langley Sculptures here, and they were given to the town, and thanks to Steve Dion and a bunch of other people, we got a whole bunch of these Bernard Langley sculptures brought to Skowhegan, and they're all over the place, including the mermaid and the woman on a pole. And this represents the Skowhegan School of Art, which actually is in Madison, but don't tell anybody. But anyway, it also says the word Skowhegan, which is nice to have one there. And we had a balloon festival here about 10 years ago now, and that was a really neat thing because they had all sorts of people going around in balloons, and you could go and watch it. And I decided to hop on a balloon. I thought, I'll never get a chance to do this again. So I went to the ATM, took some money out, hopped on the balloon, and it was a really neat experience because you got taken up, and the wind would take you in one direction, and then you get up a little higher and the wind take you back. So it's it took a short ride, but it was very, very interesting to learn about it. And of course, I forgot about the shoe industry, which is still going around here. We use that metal shoe that a local artist produced as a symbol of the shoe industry. So that gives you an idea. This mural goes from 1700s to 2018, and you notice the seasons keep changing. This is summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer. So it just gives you an idea. And then we sort of started with big people down on the bottom, the big figures down here, and then it goes up to smaller stuff, but more landscapey features near the top. And I think we had a really good time doing it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. We're looking for a place to put it, and we may have a place here in town. So I hope you guys, people get to see it, and that is the, we call it a place to watch, Skowhegan Art Club mural, done with 35 students over 2 years from Skowhegan Area High School. And thank you to everybody. We had a great show here with a lot of student artwork. Thank you to Doug Corson, and of course, thank you to Channel 11 and John Harlow for putting this together. Thank you.